Mr. Bauer had extended unlimited credit to the king and arranged contracts with him, which permitted the Rothschild tax collectors to represent and collect the king's tax from the king's subject. And this is the origin of the concept behind the establishment of the IRS. It was Bauer who suggested to King George that he enforce a tax against the colonists in the New World, since the tax being collected in England was barely enough to pay the interest on the king's loans. When English soldiers refused to fight, Mr. Bauer negotiated a contract with unemployed Russian and Germanic soldiers to fight for King George at a cost of 50 cents a day. Bauer then informed King George that he had hired these soldiers in the king's name but at a cost of $1 a day. King George utilised these soldiers, dressed them in English soldier uniforms, and ordered his career officers to command them. When his show of force in the colony failed, Mr. Bauer suggested that King George finance the colonists in their war efforts against him and bring the colonists to their knees in debt. The king succeeded in accomplishing this through his appointed civilian figurehead in charge of his government of France. Mr. Bauer wanted to expand his banking empire into the colonies. He discovered that the colonists didn't trade in gold or silver, but used scrip as the basis of their economy. The scrip money used were promissory notes printed by the colonists. Quote, all the colonists agreed they would consider these notes the lawful currency of the colonies. Mr. Bauer wanted gold or silver, and induced the king to demand that his tax in the colonies be paid in gold or silver. It was that condition that broke the camel's back and caused the Boston Tea Party. Whoever controls the money controls the country. Rothschild. Surreptitiously, King George infiltrated the colonies and their futile attempt to form a new government using spies composed of English lawyers and English aristocrats loyal to him. The spies' assignment was to infiltrate the new government, carry out the plan to defeat the colonists through debt, and establish regular reports to the king. The church also had their appointed representative in place to protect and ensure that their interest is being observed. Much of the loans received from the French went into the pockets of the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers eventually conceded to King George and the Holy Roman Church's demands by and through the intervention and persuasiveness of the king's spies. Ironically, the common denominator or glue that eventually bound King George, the Founding Fathers, the English lawyers, and English aristocrats together was the secret society called the Illuminati. Even Paul Revere and Benjamin Franklin were members of the Illuminati. This secret society had a criminal and deadly past in Europe and in America. They were eventually renamed the Free and Accepted Masons. The majority of the regular membership of the Free and Accepted Masons do not know about the Illuminati influence within their rank and file. The Illuminati members operate out of special secret societies separate from the regular Masonic membership and are found in every branch of the Free and Accepted Masons of the world. Think about the colonists who we have been taught to revere by our public school system. All of these individuals were members of this secret society, and all were traitors. Our history books also instruct us to apotheosize the Founding Fathers, but don't hold them in reverence, hold them in contempt. By and through their intervention, slaves you are, and slaves you will ever be. An example of a man in history we have been taught to revere is Benjamin Franklin. Would it shock you to learn that he was on the king's payroll, and his many trips to England was actually to report on the colonial government to King George? The Declaration of Independence is another story omitted from our American history books. Of the 51 men involved in the creation of the Declaration of Independence, 21 were actually traitors and on the king's payroll. During the Revolutionary War, English officers were provided the names, addresses, and family members of these 30 who were loyalists involved in the creation and signing of the Declaration of Independence. The English soldiers had been ordered to hunt down and murder all 30 loyalists, their wives, children and all relatives, with further instructions to burn their bodies inside their homes. The soldiers were to leave no trace of these men and their families, to wipe out their existence for an eternity. The history of civilizations has taught us all that martyrs are dangerous to men of power, and King George didn't want to leave any martyrs. It is pretty obvious who provided the detailed information about the 30 loyalists, their families and addresses. At first glance, it appeared that Guy Madison of Virginia was so concerned about lawyers holding any position in American government that he championed the 13th Amendment, which barred lawyers from holding any public office in government. The 13th Amendment was ratified but never made it into print in our government-controlled school books in public classrooms. Quote, the amendment was surreptitiously removed and replaced by the 14th Amendment. The 15th Amendment became the 14th, and so on. Madison's efforts appear admirable, but his later actions as a member of the First Congress suggest that his only real concern was to block lawyers from undermining the theft that he and his compatriots had planned for America. Once the cost of the Revolutionary War sufficiently placed the colonists in debt, the English soldiers were ordered to dispense with their efforts, recover their arms, and within the next 8 years they eventually returned to England. The colonists were so glad to see the fighting stop that they allowed the soldiers to retreat and exit America peacefully. There is an old legal maxim that states, "The first to leave the field of battle loses." Pursuant to this maxim, the Founding Fathers proclaimed the colonists the victors. A maxim is a legal truth that is time-honoured and incorruptible. In reality, the war was just a diversion. The colonists had no chance of succeeding in their efforts. Examine the facts for yourself. During this era, England had the largest army and navy in the world. King George owned England, Ireland and France, having a combined population of about 60 million subjects. The colonists were poorly educated, poorly armed and composed of farmers, tradesmen, bonded slaves, women and children, and boasted a total population of only 3 million subjects. And considering the undermining that was occurring to their nation by the king's spies and the Founding Fathers, the colonists didn't have a prayer of defeating the English. Americans have been indoctrinated by our federal and state governments, and through government-controlled public schools and literature, government-controlled media, and government-controlled churches, yes, even the churches, to believe that America defeated the English. We celebrate that victory and our so-called independence each year on the 4th of July. It's all a bunch of propaganda. Carrot to lead the horse and keep this society stupid and passive. Quote, this is a quote, "We boast today that our country represents the finest schools in the world, but in reality we are no smarter than the first colonists. We only know more about other things because of new technology developments during the last 250 years, and yet the average IQ of Americans is 70.
You're kidding me. That's just above retarded.
Oh.
100 is average. I think Australia is 110 average.
Amazing.
No wonder they're in so much trouble.
Anyway, he says that the documented proof that the Constitution was not for the people can be found at Padelford, Padelford, Fay and Co. versus the mayor and the aldermen of the city of Savannah, 14 Georgia 438-520. This was a court case wherein the plaintiffs sued the city of Savannah for violating what they believed were their constitutionally protected rights. The decision of the judge says it all. Quoting, "But indeed no private person has a right to complain by suit in court on the ground of a breach of the Constitution.